Hi, everyone, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 4 of The Breakdown with Rothman Orthopedics. I'm your host, Alex Hammond, and today we have a special guest co-host, Marc Farzetta, host of The Farzy Show. Thanks for joining me today.
Looking forward to it.
Well, what are we talking about?
We are talking today about weekend warriors. I deal with a lot of people that consider themselves to be weekend warriors, so we figure what's the best way to protect them when it comes to all their orthopedic needs.
We are going to be speaking with Dr. Stephen Stache Jr. He is the chief of non-operative sports medicine at Rothman Orthopedics. Also, make sure you listen all the way through because we are going to be doing a special giveaway, courtside tickets for the Sixers Clippers in January. All right, and now for our interview with Dr. Stache. All right, I'd like to welcome in Dr. Stephen Stache Jr., Chief of Non-Operative Sports Medicine at Rothman Orthopedics. So thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Alex. It's great to be here today.
So before we get started on the topic of the day, tell us about how you end up at Rothman and your areas of expertise.
Sure. So I went to medical school at Jefferson and really fell in love with the institution in Philadelphia after doing my undergraduate training at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. And so once I started to establish at Jefferson, chose to stay and do my residency. I trained in family medicine. And during the process of figuring out what I wanted to do, really started to be drawn to non-surgical sports medicine, more on the taking care of athletes and the whole person versus just unique injuries. So I did my fellowship in sports medicine at Jefferson as well, and had the fortunate opportunity to come right on board and start it with Rothman, then Institute, now Orthopedics, and have been there since. And during my time, I've had the luxury and things I'm very proud about doing, working with different teams, and still providing care for the patients in the community.
Awesome. So I'm probably going to put you on a spot a little bit just because when we were discussing originally the topic, you told us kind of a funny story about your weekend warrior experience. So if you don't, go ahead and talk a little bit about that. What happened?
See, I'm not a weekend warrior,
Okay.
but once every 10 years. Weekend warriors, I think of people that they go out there every weekend and they have their activity, they have their sport, whatever it is. And I really don't play that many sports anymore. I grew up playing sports, not so much now. But I got asked to play in a hockey tournament with some other guys that I work with Nasty Knuckles podcast is the name of their podcast. Riley Cote, former Flyer, Derek Settlemyer, former equipment manager for the Flyers. And I thought their hockey tournament was going to be an honorary thing where they drop a ball, because it was a ball hockey tournament, and we wave, we take a shot, and we go home for the day, and that's it. It ended up being 5 separate 20-minute games, 10-minute halves. We were playing against full teams, rosters of 15. We just had 5 guys, and I was one of the 5 guys. I'm literally borrowing pads from other people to play. And it ended up being an all-day thing, sore as sore can be, the next day. And I was told take an ice bath afterwards. That ended up helping. I want to ask you about that a little bit later, doctor. But that ended up being like my cure-all. For any aches and pains. It really sped up the process of recovery for me. But I used to be out there every weekend, basketball, even like golf. I play golf if walking, only walking, because it's only a sport if you walk, right. I believe. And then it's having fun. And I just don't do that anymore on the regular. So took about 10 years off, and that was my first time really playing a real big time athletic event. And it was really sore and painful.
So this kind of leads us to where we are today. So with that being said, I know he said too, he's like 10 years off, but who or what would actually, what is the weekend warrior? Because again, is it someone who just participates in activities during the weekend? Is it just the person who occasionally? So what would your definition be, the formal definition?
Well, I think popular culture definition for weekend warrior does kind of revolve around the alliteration of the WW, but in reality, I kind of look at a weekend warrior as anybody who is participating in a sport or activity that is really looking at it as more of a competition or something that they're really committed to. But I think it's also part of culture now where exercise, and I think that's one of the great things about the Philadelphia area, is this is a really sports intense town, and that transitions to people's personal lives and their commitments to recreational sports. And so I think the traditional definition revolves around recreational sports, but for me, it's really about people who are out there exercising and training and kind of the mentality that comes with that. And I think your story really illustrates a point that people need to be careful about, which is the unintended consequence and the unexpected nature of when things were more than you thought they would be, right? And that's a really common thing that will lead to an injury, whether it's overuse or actually sports related, like in the moment injury. It's when I signed up for A and I got B and I was no way, shape, prepared for B,
Right.
and now I have to deal with the consequences that come with not being ready for B. And that's something that, a lot of people have the mentality, again, Philly, blue collar, tough, Rocky, great, love it. I'm just gonna muscle through, right? And that's great until it's not, right? And then you gotta come see me.
Right.
And then we keep you in business.
Right.
Exactly.
So thank you.
Yeah.
But let me help you be better.
Right. I always think of it as the person that has the day job, whether that's construction, whether it's blue collar, whether it's white collar, whatever it might be. And they still got their softball league on Wednesdays, even if it's not a weekend, right? They still got their softball league on Wednesdays, they got their basketball league on Sundays, whatever it might be, their touch football league, whatever. And they still stay committed to that, as you were saying.
Yeah, and I think that if you take the step back and look at the bigger picture, it's really about fitness and activity and the commitment to something that you want to be part of, whether that's on the individual level or as part of a team. And like I said, I think that's just ingrained in the culture around here.
So would you say there's like a way to kind of prep for that kind of lifestyle where you're not really doing it all the time, that it's just, here I am, like you said, if it's like a Wednesday, I'm going to play a pickup game, or, like what's the best approach to it?
I think if you're involved in a league, then you need to be prepared for what comes with that league. Like, that's a commitment. A lot of times, there's equipment, there's fees, and so, like what you're signing up for, so like you should train for that, right? And the training is something that you're doing to prepare. And like, when you're younger and you're participating in sports as a youth or on the high school or collegiate level, like that's part of the culture there, right? And so when you transition to the culture of being part of a group, like, the Manny Young Sports Club or whatever, like you should participate as if it's still somewhat the same. And when you kind of deviate away from that, or life gets in the way, like job, life, kids, you start to lose sight of all that comes with it. And again, it only increases the risk. And so I think for me, it's really, if you're committed to this and it's an important part of what you do, then you should give it your due diligence and make sure that you're preparing for it.
Okay. So I personally, question, just because there's that sense, but then there's also just the people that are just all the time that they're in the gym. So I remember just kind of running a lot. And then again, like you mentioned earlier, where it's like, when do you know where it's like that pain where it's like, okay, like it's bothering me, I can kind of like go through it? Or is it just some like stuff to kind of look out for? But is there like overuse injuries? You mentioned that. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
So the way that I kind of describe this to my patients is you have to look at pain on a continuum, right? What I always talk to people about is understanding the discomfort pain threshold, right? Discomfort is something that you feel that's a negative stimulation to your body, but sometimes, perhaps in the recovery from an injury where your body isn't quite ready for the full amount of activity, like some discomfort is necessary and you have to figure out how much is too much. And so everybody's threshold can be a little different, but pain is your body telling you that you are doing something that you are not supposed to be doing, right? And it's typically like above and beyond. And that's a signal that you're hurting yourself or you're putting yourself at risk. And so, some of our athletes that have chronic conditions that they're gonna be in pain, but they're committed and they enjoy it and it's good for mental health, like that's a really constant struggle. And, in the heat of the moment in competition where you are involved in something that's more than you sign up for, like that line can get a little blurred, right? Hey, we're there for that too.
Yeah, right.
But it's important because, for me, I was a collegiate athlete. I made the decision that, for my lifestyle, like participation in competitive sports really isn't in line with my goals, but I'm very physically fit. Like I use my Peloton, drank that Kool-Aid. I'm looking at my Apple Watch every day to close my rings, right? Like, and that's another thing we can talk about later is all the data that's available for people to track their fitness. Like, it's great. It really helps promote fitness, which is important, but it can create this kind of obsessive, kind of compulsive culture of, well, I have to get to the gym and I have to get on the treadmill, and that can take you down a different kind of rabbit hole.
What you got?
On those notes, when you're talking about preparing for something, like maybe you are a weekend warrior, but you're the guy that takes a couple of weeks off, or maybe a month off, or in my case, like I said, a decade. What are the best ways for people to prep their bodies for that work?
It's a really great question. So I look at things in kind of layers. And I think the first thing that you have to kind of conceptualize is the difference between kind of being in shape and being fit, right? And think about those terms, right? In shape kind of implies our physicality, right? And you can look like you're in shape or have the self-concept of being in shape, but not being physically fit. So when I start to talk to patients about that, the idea of fitness and exercise and activity really breaks down into 4 components for me. You have cardiovascular exercise, which a lot of people understand. That's the running, that's the getting your heart rate up to improve your fitness and endurance. But then there's strength and muscular training, balance and flexibility, and then recreational sports. And you need to really focus on a diverse program that taps into cardio, strength, and flexibility if you want to reduce your risk of injury when participating in recreational sports. And it kind of doesn't matter what recreational sport you're thinking about. There'll be some nuances, like what a guy's going to do for golf is different than what the weekend runner is going to do when they're cruising around the loop on the Schuylkill River. But at the end of the day, each of them are going to have their goals, and when you understand what's required of your sport, you can then tailor your exercise plan to really tap into all 3 of those groups and reduce your risk of injury while participating in the recreational sports.
When a lot of people go out there and they play that sport and they experience a little bit of pain or discomfort, a lot of times their significant other, maybe friends, will say, you should go see a doctor, you should go talk to a doctor, whatever it might be. And 9 times out of 10, that person will say, I'm sure it's nothing. When do you really know? When's a good indicator for the average Joe to go, okay, this is something?
So again, I'll go back to the pain discomfort threshold, right? That's a very clear indicator for me. Like when it seems more than you're really expecting, like, okay, I was playing, kind of rolled my ankle, hurts a little bit, wake up next day, you go to put your foot down on the ground and say, whoa, yeah, that's bad. Like that's a sign that like maybe you should really look into seeing somebody. And then our bodies are pretty amazing, right? They respond in positive ways and negative ways, right? So you can heal and start to recover from something that's relatively minor until you don't, right? And so if that process really starts to deviate from your expect, like, okay, I gave this 2 or 3 days and I'm just not turning the corner, as Alex and I have kind of talked about before, that's kind of like the check engine light coming on in your car saying like, yeah, you got to get in and let this car get looked at. Like, so your inability to respond to kind of the traditional rest, ice, elevation, over-the-counter medications is a signal that it might be really time to seek consultation with a physician.
I was going to say, I like to ignore the check engine. Sometimes I was like, that's not a good.
necessarily good thing.
I was like, let's just cover that.
My father would be looking at me saying like, what are you doing?
I was like, at least I've got like 15 more miles before I really have to consider doing something with that. I'm sorry.
I'm cool with letting the gas light run. That's a little exhilarating, Seinfeld style, but the check engine light,
Totally. I'm binging that, by the way, on Netflix. How do you not? We talked about prep, and let's talk about the recovery for a second here, because there's that battle of like ice versus cold, right? An ice bath, or do you put a hot compress or a heating pad, whatever it might be. What's that battle? Who wins the battle? I'm sure it's case by case, but hot and cold, what do you decide?
So I'll take a step back and just make a comment on something that you said, and it's the bigger concept of rest, right? A lot of athletes who are committed, these weekend warriors, really motivated, got to participate, don't necessarily view rest in the appropriate context of what it does for your body. Rest should be considered an active part of the process of fitness, right? Your body needs time to recover. Right? We'll just use muscle hypertrophy for an example. If you want your muscle to get bigger, you exercise it with a stressor, lifting weights, that causes damage that then needs to heal. Healing takes time. Time and rest go together. And so if you're a 7-day-a-weeker and you're really not taking advantage of some sort of diverse program that includes stretching and you're really just going all the time, you're at risk for overuse injuries. And then it doesn't matter how much ice you try to soak yourself in or how much heat you wrap yourself in, like you're on a road that leads to injury. But to answer your question, it really depends. So if you have joint pain, pain typically responds to ice. I kind of consider ice nature's anti-inflammatory. So that instance where you're playing your ball hockey and maybe you got boarded. They have boards.
Which I did.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
No.
Good. They have boards in ball hockey.
There was a lot of.
And you wake up the next day and your shoulder's sore. That's a situation where I think ice would be probably a little bit more appropriate. However, you're really tight, your back's locked up because, Johnny was making me run a lot and then I got boarded. Like that might be a situation where heat works. What you're really looking for though is the response. You want to use the treatment and say, oh, that made a difference, right? And sometimes people will experiment with different things. Like maybe you need heat in the morning to kind of loosen up. Maybe it's ice in the evening to cool down. Like that's the adage that I was taught playing college sports. Heat to warm up, ice to cool down, right? And so that's kind of what I pitch to my patients. But at the end of the day, like there's not a whole lot of harm beyond your skin getting burned from either or. Like you can get an ice burn. So if you're in this process where you're working through things on your own and you're just not quite ready to pick up the phone, I don't have a problem with patients trying either heat or ice. It's really what you think works for you.
Why was that ice bath for me so magical? Like it basically made me feel 1,000 times better.
I mean, if your body was really inflamed and you had a lot of sore muscles, like ice can help soothe that pain. Interestingly enough, though, there is some evidence that it could actually slow muscle recovery. So it's one of those things that in kind of chronic use may not be the best thing. But in your instance, I think, you were totally overwhelmed, completely underprepared, and your body was like, nah, I'm not really happy that you did this.
Shut down.
So you literally cooled it down, right? And
Yeah,
like that's a reasonable thing to do. You should always protect your fingers and toes with ice baths, just a disclaimer.
No, that's easy. Okay, perfect. All right.
I know that.
Yeah, they actually sell them. You can get them on whatever your online retailer might be, without making a plug.
No, I go to stores.
Yeah.
No, just kidding, yeah.
Or
What
in
are
your local
those?
sporting goods store on the streets of Philadelphia. Support your local community. But yeah, like you got to be careful because you can get frostbite.
Okay.
That was something that I learned in college where we were always going into the ice baths and like, wow, my fingers are not the right color.
Good indication.
Yeah.
Well, what's the wrong? Well, what like you said, you knew that. So like, when's it too much then?
Yeah. Well, I mean, then, for instance, we could talk about runners who are running outside. Like, you'll see a lot of runners who like are in the shortest shorts that they've ever worn, but they're wearing gloves, right? Because as you run, your blood is shunting away from your extremities to help process the metabolism in your muscles, so it'll pull to your core, your other muscles that are being very active. So your fingertips and toes can get cold like that, which is why a lot of runners tend to wear gloves.
So I want to actually back up a little bit because I always struggle with what's better, warming up or cool down. Like, so is it the pre-stretch or post-stretch?
It's both.
Okay.
It's both, right?
So
a muscle that's not ready to handle a physiological stress is at increased risk for injury. So it's really important to warm up. And so a lot of times in whatever sport you're kind of watching, you'll see the athletes that are out there running around, doing more dynamic movement related stuff. Some will do what we consider static stretches, which is like the bend and touch your toes. But basically increasing blood flow to your muscles, preparing them for the physiological exercise challenge really helps with performance and can reduce the risk of injury. Cooling down is giving your muscles an adequate time to kind of recover in the short term. That's where a lot of static stretching can be helpful. But there's also particular dynamics, like with the Phillies, those guys come into the clubhouse and they're doing repetitive motions. Pitchers are working on their shoulder. Like there are very specific protocols that these guys take advantage of all the time.
pretty terrible at both. Like I feel like I'm better with like warming up because if I'm going to run, I'm like at least I'm walking and kind of getting things moving. The stretching, not so good at that.
I left my cards in the car.
I know how
So,
to. I know how to reach you. I know how to get in touch with you.
Just in case.
Yeah, just in case.
I feel like every time I have participated in a Weekend Warrior event, whatever it might be, even when I was playing like sports on the regular, when I was younger, I always felt like there was one guy in the group, if you were stretching, they'd always go, that doesn't do anything. Like I always felt like there was one person, it doesn't do anything, it's a waste of time. What's the ruling there?
Yeah, I mean, if you spend any time at any point in life in the gym, like you're going to have some guy that says that he knows better,
Yeah, right,
right?
of course, yeah.
But there are certain trends in sports that like have been around for a long, long time, right? And so like warming up is a pretty standard thing across all competitive sports. How you approach it, I guess there can be some variability in what's unique to your body. Like if you're a guy who has super tight hamstrings and you've been that way your whole life, then maybe stretching statically isn't going to work for you. And I'm okay with that. But I think the point is you should be doing something. Right? Warming up and cooling down are really good for your body in general in any capacity. And so how you choose to do that and what's unique to you, I think there could be some variability. But I would make the argument, like if Johnny's the guy that's telling you that that's not doing anything and Johnny's been hurt, 5 times over the last 3 seasons, Johnny probably doesn't know what he's talking about.
He's got every ace bandage on.
Yeah.
No demand. Yeah.
Yeah, hey, don't stretch, but when you wrap up with this ace bandage, I'm telling you.
It ain't gonna get hurt.
Do you know my friend Johnny? You sound just no. All right.
I've been here for 20 years, so I know a lot of Johnny.
Like how many Johnnies,
Yeah,
right?
Bobbies and Vinnies, man. We're buddies.
Massage guns, therapy guns seem to be the big
trend.
rage. I mean, talking about your online purchasers, seems
Yeah.
like everyone's got one now.
Yeah.
Ruling on that.
Yeah, so full
what's that?
disclosure, I drank that Kool-Aid a long time ago, and I've recently been exploring a lot of the other kind of, like, personally for me, but also to be able to, like, answer questions for patients, like, is this a bunch of BS or not? And so it's a different form of activation of the muscle, right? So if you're really tight, that's typically a sign that you had that physical stress, and there are chemicals within your muscle that'll build up, like lactic acid, right? That's what causes that, like, post-exercise sting, right? And massaging can increase blood flow to that muscle, and the companies will tell you that their particular type of massage gun vibrates at a particular frequency that will give you this much more recovery. Like, whether that's science or not, we can debate
Love
that
these
another.
accents.
Yeah.
Like, who knew?
We can debate that another time, but I think the principle is that massaging is similar to stretching, and when you're trying to allow a muscle to be manipulated in a manner that can promote recovery. And so I think it's a really good tool. I have one, I use it. I actually bought one of those massage balls. A little bit more complicated on how one uses it. I foam roll all the time.
Oh,
that's
that was
that's
gonna be my
another really
question.
good form of kind of different form of muscle activation and joint mobilization, right? That's something we haven't spent any time talking about. We're focused on muscles, but joints get stiff. Joints move less over time if you don't activate them. Spines are notorious for this. So, like, 100% confident after playing college football, I have spine arthritis. And it's one of the things, like, I got it in my room. It's next to my bed. I wake up in the morning, oh man, I'm pretty stiff. Get my foam roller out. I actually have plastic rollers. I have foam rollers. I tinkered with the vibrating rollers. I didn't like them too much. And it helps loosen me up. It makes my day start off better. I feel more relaxed. I'm relieved. I can kind of get going. And, these are my personal stories. And I think in everything that I have to keep in my mind when taking care of patients, like, I'm certain that there's evidence out there that exists that could support the use. Do I have that, like, ready for you in my brain right now? No. But I also look at these interventions similar to what I said earlier when it comes to the idea of ice and heat, and that's the risk-reward ratio, right? Can I say with confidence that foam rolling is going to work for everybody? Absolutely not. Can I say with confidence that foam rolling is going to hurt a lot of people? No, it's not going to hurt a lot of people. And so if it's going to be beneficial, yeah, it's reasonable to try. If you aren't really necessarily interested in going to talk to a physical therapist or physician, okay, I think that's reasonable. Like, get on YouTube, check it out, get some instructional videos so that you're doing it the right way. But if there's something that is potentially beneficial at a low kind of cost for harm, whether it's a personal monetary cost, that's, hey, consumerism. But I think those are all reasonable things that you can try.
I mentioned ace bandages a second ago as a joke. I will tell you this, though. My father, when we go golfing, he wears just about every ace bandage imaginable.
Yeah.
How helpful is that? Is it really supportive? I know it's $1 billion industry and all that. How supportive and how helpful are things like that?
So, again, give some context. Ballparking your age, your father's age.
39, 69.
If he's 69, he very likely has some arthritis in different areas, right? That arthritis is going to cause stiffness.
Let's not give him excuses. Okay?
Right.
I'm just
I
starting to
understand.
beat him.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
But in reality, like, it happens to all of us, right? I got arthritis in different parts of my body. It is what it is. Again, injuries, college sports. I'm okay with that. You learn to adapt. But the point of using things like an ace bandage or any sort of supportive device is you're trying to help provide extra kind of compression or support to that joint. And so, like, I think the knee is probably the most common that is supported. And there are layers here, right? So you can go with an ace bandage or a compressive wrap, and that's just giving you a little support, a little compression, helping things. If the knee starts to get swollen, that can give it a little bit of extra support. You take it another layer up, and that's like a brace with a hinge or a bar and a strap. Now you're getting a little bit of extra stability. In orthopedics, we use customized braces all the time that can literally change the angle of your knee, that can shift forces to protect areas that are arthritic. Yeah, it's a really nice tool that can really be helpful for some people. And I tell people all the time with braces, they're great. Put them on when you need them, take them off when you don't, right? This isn't like a medication that you took and, like, oh man, I'm committed to this for like 6 hours. And oh my God, my stomach is killing me. Well, that's unfortunate, right? So that there's kind of like that triage list that if you're really trying to go for low risk without real significant harm to your body. Like braces are completely reasonable. How to navigate this industry that you refer to, like that's challenging. But I always kind of look at that tiering, like, okay, level 1, basic compression, level 2, bars and straps, level 3, like big, like clearly like NFL lineman style braces.
Right.
Is there sort of like a dependency? Like, is there, obviously there is benefits to wearing it, but if you wear it too much, like, are you not?
Yeah.
I remember just like from doing competitive cheerleading with tumbling, and I always had to wrap my ankles.
Yeah.
So I didn't know if it was getting better or if, I mean, it's helping, then it's not, there's no pain, I can do whatever I want, but is there just a dependency?
There are negatives to it.
Yeah.
I think there
There certainly can be. And that's why, you know, if you're really committed and like, you know, let's say for instance, you're listening to this podcast, you're like, wow, that customized brace sounds awesome. Like you should seek consultation with your physician and find out whether that's an option that's right for you, because it might not be, right? Let's say that actually you have a whole bunch of muscle deconditioning, and with appropriate exercise in a focused manner, you can then allow those muscles to support your joint in a different manner. It could be a plug for your dad, although if he gets better at golf, then it's your fault, right? So you don't have to do that. But the point is, like, by training your muscles, you could possibly achieve what that ACE wrap or compression sleeve is doing, and then you're not dependent on it. But then there are other chronic conditions that no matter how much you train or how much pain, discomfort you deal with or how much medication, like it's still going to be hard to do what you want to do because you're committed, you're a weekend warrior, you're ready to go. Braces can be pretty reasonable.
Got it.
I know a lot of people listening to this probably have their own home remedies for things. I'm sure you must have heard a couple of crazy ones, or ones that maybe you wouldn't recommend. We'll put it that way. Any jump out to you?
I'll go with science, right?
That sounds good.
Yeah. So there's actually some
right.
evidence that turmeric, the spice, has some anti-inflammatory properties.
Really?
Yeah, and so that's a low-hanging fruit in my perspective, where you can take that as a supplement and really not have a whole lot of risk other than maybe some GI side effects. You know, like if you're spooning, spoons and spoons.
Like
and spoons
whole,
of-
like mouthfuls.
Yeah, you're probably going to get an upset stomach there, right?
Probably.
But that's it. I counsel my patients on that's something that is low risk, high potential yield. And omega-3 fatty acids also have some evidence that they can be helpful. Now, well, I don't eat fish, so I can't do that. Well, there are plant-based omega-3 fatty acids, and I'll get a lot of questions about, like glucosamine and chondroitin and other nutraceuticals. The evidence for macronutrients versus micronutrients gets a little bit sketchy. So what is the difference? A macronutrient is something that you ingest that you're hoping your body will reconstitute into something that it's going to use to support your calories, like glucosamine and chondroitin. Turns out the evidence isn't so great that your GI system will break that down and put it back together. But a micronutrient like omega-3 fatty acids is literally a fundamental cell building block, right? So when your body breaks it down, it can get distributed to whatever cells your body might need. And so that's something that there is evidence that it can be helpful for cellular support for your eyes, your heart, your brain, your skin, and your joints. So from a bang for buck standpoint, that's not an unreasonable option if you're looking to try something that may give you some benefit.
I was just going to say, I feel like, we were talking prior, but I feel like my acupuncturist might like that turmeric thing. And I'm going to,
Again, without knowing the actual data, I know that at points in the past when answering questions, I've reviewed studies and it's really low risk. And I think there's a study that was done in India, with just unbelievable amounts of turmeric were administered with very low risk of side effects. So, for those who are really trying to stay on the natural path, it's pretty reasonable to go.
Good to know.
Lots of teas out there for our warm liquid drinkers.
That's true. There definitely is that.
This is good cold water.
Is there?
That's a whole other. I'm gonna get to the bottom of that.
See what Dr. Google says.
I am.
I was just going to ask.
WebMD is so legit. So
The digital age, all the information is available. But I didn't study it though. I just read it.
Right.
And
Yes.
I don't know it. I just know what
It's
I read.
true.
How do you guard against things that might be a little misleading?
So I'm going to get on my soapbox for a second
Please
here,
do.
because I think this is something that I talk to my medical students about. I think it's really important. And there's this phenomenon in culture that is really well summarized in a novel. I forget the author's name, but it's called The Death of Expertise. Okay, and it's a really great book. You should read it.
I love the title.
I mean,
But the concept is we live in a age where information is readily available and freely accessible in an incomprehensible amount. That doesn't mean that Johnny, your buddy,
He's an idiot.
who reads stuff online has the knowledge to interpret and synthesize that information that's really going to be meaningful for what you need. And that's where an expert who, maybe goes to like medical school and spends a couple years in residency and a couple years additionally training in sports medicine might be a better authority than Johnny, who I'm sure he's a well-respected individual and
Maybe
works
like
really
you.
hard. Yeah, right? And we're available at Rothman Orthopedics taking appointments right now. In all seriousness, it's one of those things that like it's really frustrating to me because like I spend my day every day with my first goal of helping people. Like when it's my kids are driving me crazy, I didn't get a good night's sleep last night, I woke up at 5 o'clock this morning to get a workout in because I know I'm going to be in the office for 9 hours, and then I got meetings or I get to do a wonderful podcast, right? I'm trying to help people, right? And people get in their own way because the internet helps them think they know better, right? And this isn't a shot at people being non-intelligent because I have a lot of incredibly intelligent patients that just don't know how to interpret the information that they're digesting, right?
Well said.
So like that's why we're here. That's why we go to school. That's part of us as professionals helping people. There's another thing that I think is really, really challenging, and there's a technical term, but it's a stay in your lane, right? Stay in your lane, right? My lawyers who are out there, like your lawyers, great, thanks for practicing law. Really appreciate what you're doing. That doesn't necessarily make you able to qualify yourself for understanding medical knowledge. Like, let me help you, let me talk. And so that's a really important phenomenon that I think is just inherent in our society. And so getting back to the point, like if you're not sure, we're here to help. Like come in, be seen. Let us help you.
I know I'm guilty of it, so I can't even. I'm just like, listen, I'm like, okay. I mean,
like think about it. Like, doctors are smart people, and like, oh, I'm really good at finance, right? I'm gonna look at Wall Street. Like, I don't know what I'm looking at, right? I'm gonna get a financial advisor. He's a professional. He's gonna help me. So you kind of got to know your limits, and that's one thing I think in professional sports medicine, you learn pretty quickly. Like you know what you're good at, you know your lane, you stay in your lane. When you don't have the answer, you get the other guy or gal from their lane to be part of the team to take care of these elite level athletes.
well said. Wasn't a bad soapbox.
It's important though, I think, like,
that's
because
okay.
we're all trying to do right, and we're all trying to.
Absolutely.
No, I get it. I do have to run this by you, though, because in the days before there was the WebMD, before there was the YouTube doctor and all that stuff, there was Dr. Mom, and that was just Dr. Mom ruled.
Yeah.
When I think of Dr. Mom, I think of my grandmother who raised 12 kids, all right? And she tried everything. Like, there was, like, any remedy for anything growing up, I got this for it, whatever.
Right.
But her soapbox was witch hazel. And it was witch hazel. Like, if I rolled an ankle, if I pulled a muscle, if I did anything,
Was it witch hazel and then wrap it with an ace bandage?
it would be a rag, it'd be a bandage, and like a plastic bag, just so it wouldn't get all over the place. And I'm not kidding you, that worked for me a million times.
Yeah.
So it's that thing, like any science behind that whatsoever, and just keep in mind, whatever your answer is, you could be making a lot of people cry.
Yeah.
But no, she's fine.
Don't
she's
insult Grandma.
She's a tough lady.
I mean, the short answer is like I'm not really sure what the chemical effect of witch hazel is, right? I know, but in all seriousness, in all seriousness, in Tuck's medicated pads for hemorrhoids, the active ingredient is witch hazel.
What, really?
Yeah, look it up.
I've not had to experience
I
that
know
one.
it's
But
good for your face.
Yeah.
Witch hazel, that I do
And so,
know.
like,
Okay.
listen, that's I don't have the confidence to give you like a solid scientific answer, right? But I will contextualize in the process of taking care of those 12 kids. Like your grandmother, like experienced a lot. I'm sure there were some pretty significant wounds and things like, but the maturity and wisdom that comes with time, like there's some fundamental value to that. But Dr. Grandma versus doctor who went to school,
Right.
like there's some nuance there, right? And I'll digress for a second. If she's gonna listen to this, she'll be mortified that I'm talking about her. But
no, she's not shy.
when I was in college, I I tore my ACL and I was on crutches and had surgery and all that stuff. Recovered well, still running, very happy. But at the same time, my sister was playing basketball, rolled her ankle, right? And Dr. Mom, who was busy taking care of me, like after, pretty significant injury and surgery, was like, wow, you're fine. Well, it turns out she wasn't fine. She had a broken ankle.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. And she will let my mom, she'll let my mom know every now and then, like, hey, do you remember that? So, like, everybody as a family wants to do best. There's a lot of love there. But sometimes advice can cut both ways.
Our cure was ginger ale.
I'm really glad.
Oh, yeah.
I'm really glad Witch Hazel worked for you. I wish I had the time to prep for that because I would have done a little internet research.
Yeah, just YouTube.
Yeah,
You'll find
exactly.
out.
Yeah. But the point is that you can go down the rabbit hole for many things, and I'm sure. I'm trying to remember when I was a kid, like the Vicks Vapo Rub, right?
Oh,
Had that
yeah.
thing, right?
Yeah.
And that's just a vasodilator where it opens you up a little bit. But yeah, there's lots of different things that you could kind of explore if you wanted.
While we're on that path, I do have to ask you this, nothing to do with science, but she was from the Baltimore area, my grandmother, and Baltimore area,
Baltimore.
yeah. Dundalk specifically.
Yeah. Okay,
yeah.
that's definitely
Dundalk,
Baltimore. Oh, yeah.
tropical Dundalk.
Baltimore.
Jeez. So I have to ask you this because you're from the Pittsburgh area, no? You're from the Pittsburgh area. So I know because I've been to Pittsburgh a million times, and I'm aware of how well it's grown with their restaurant business.
So,
Oh, fantastic. So I know it's more than this, but it's the cliche, and I'll ask you this. Would you go, if you had to, what would make you the happiest? If we put a Permane Brothers sandwich in front of you, or if we put steamed crabs in front of you? What's the thing? I know you're going to say cheesesteak anyway because we're in Philly, but anyway, what makes you happiest?
I'm a crab fan.
You're a crab fan?
I'm a crab
You're
fan.
a crab fan?
Really?
You have to be a crab fan. Is there anything better than a plate full of tables and a table full of crabs?
Yeah, we actually did a bachelor party in Ocean City, Maryland.
Oh,
and on the first night, we had like the biggest crab pot bash ever. So for all the things that I maybe don't really remember well about Baltimore, I will say that crabs carried on with me, and I do enjoy them. It's funny. I was fully expecting you to ask me what I would choose for any sandwich versus cheesesteak, right? That's where I'm going.
Well, okay, so that's the follow-up
Yeah.
for Manny's versus a cheesesteak.
Well, I don't eat bread anymore.
Oh.
So, but if in my heyday I had to pick, I'd definitely pick a Permane sandwich. There's just something about French fries on a sandwich
This
that
is true.
you can't. It's just a different thing. Now, I think the challenge in the Philadelphia area is the variety of cheesesteaks, right? Because when you're in Pittsburgh, like it's just a Permane sandwich, right? Like you'll have the local bar's version of Permane sandwich, but it's like pretty
It's the same
close
concept.
to the same.
Yeah.
Right? Like going to Del Sandro's versus Tony Luke's versus Steve's King of Steaks. I'll keep going. Like there's a lot of differences there.
Right.
So I think that kind of muddies the waters in your comparison. It's not really scientific.
That's where people will argue over the key. What I always enjoy about the cheesesteak debate is like they're all a lot of them. Like yes, they're differently made, but it's still meat, cheese, and bread.
Right.
That's,
Like you can't mess up that concept.
I'm not going to say no to
Yeah.
that.
Right.
But the trick is to get your favorite and then act like everyone else is crazy.
Right.
Who doesn't like your
Right.
favorite
And
cheesesteak?
how that's ingrained into the culture.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And everyone
exactly.
always says like their favorite place is the best place.
Oh,
and it's
yeah,
like
that
that's,
place. Pff, nah, you
yeah, like
gotta
don't go
try
there.
it.
You got to go to this one over there. It's like I don't know. Like you said, it's meat and cheese on bread. Like I'm happy.
Although I feel a little guilty that we're talking about exercise and fitness while we're now talking about food. So and maybe not the healthiest.
No, we call this balance.
Yeah.
Right.
So we're talking about the weekend warrior stuff because typically a lot of times like people do this stuff. They'll go out for a beer afterwards.
Cheat meal.
Yeah, let's transition to nutrition if you want to talk
There
about
you go.
That's a nice little segue. So
No, you know what I want to do is actually, speaking of transitioning, so we actually are having our very first podcast giveaway. So I want to do this before we wrap up. I know it's like
Somebody wins a hat.
somebody's gonna win a hat. It's a big deal. Like you're here, Dr. Stache is here, Marc's here, so we kind of have to do it big. So at some point, social media, once this episode airs, we're gonna be hosting a giveaway. So it's for our listeners to win courtside tickets to the Sixers versus Clippers game on Friday, January 21st at the Wells Fargo Center. So courtside seats.
Wow.
I know,
That's better than
right?
a hat.
Right?
Yeah.
Maybe with the hat we were contemplating whether like t-shirt
Yeah,
or
right,
whatever.
right.
So we're like, all right, courtside.
maybe get a Rothman hat on.
Maybe with like a little, you might need to. Yeah, they don't know they're about to get a swag bag with it too now. But to enter, so simply make sure you are following Rothman's Instagram page, which is at Rothman Ortho, as well as Marc's page, which is at Marc Farzetta.
Yep.
and then tag a friend who would like to bring along to the game. So that is our giveaway, and I just wanted to sneak that in there before we kind of wrap up this conversation.
Seamlessly done.
Right?
Nice plug.
How'd I do?
That was perfect.
Okay, awesome. All right, so what else? Any other questions you have for, I know you mentioned nutrition. I mean, I guess it's kind of important to...
Yeah, I mean, when you kind of... Oh, let me refer to the list. Yeah, I want to make sure you have any,
if
you have any burning questions.
We've covered the bases.
Throw some more witch hazel at me.
Yeah, right.
Witch hazel and ginger ale.
I'm not kidding you. She used to do this thing with hot water and grape seeds.
Grape seeds.
I think
you
she...
gotta get some Greek background there.
Yeah, I know, right?
Throwing in some leaves.
Yeah, I'm like...
No, she was actually Polish. Yeah. But no, she that was the thing. That I don't know what it was, but I had a bad bruise.
Yeah.
And she treated it with that.
Did it work?
I don't remember. I was
I'm
so
totally
little.
channeling my big fat Greek wedding here. With
Right? I know. No, it's one of those things. It's just one of those things that she did.
Yeah.
And that was a cure-all along with witch hazel. It's Dr. Mom.
Don't really have grape seeds as part of my regular repertoire.
What are you doing?
You don't write subscriptions like...
Take medical school.
Take 3 grape leaves, call me in the morning, and see what happens.
So nutrition, I think, is a really important part, right? So muscles require energy, right? Energy is taken in our bodies in the forms of the food that we eat, and that turns into nutrition. Very complex topic. We could have a whole podcast about it. I don't think that we have to get into great detail, but if you're really committed to exercise, whether you're a weekend warrior or you're just trying to stay in shape or be fit, to go back to my terms, food is fuel, right? If you put, regular unleaded into a Ferrari, that Ferrari's engine is not going to run appropriately, right? Okay. Now, we're not all Ferraris, right? And we're not all designed to be Ferraris. But the point is, you need to think critically about how you're doing things. And so with that, making sure that you take in appropriate, I'm a kind of a believer in the macronutrients, right? Like you have your different, you need carbohydrates in some form. You need proteins, fats, and if you're a vegetarian, you got to do this. If you're so there's lots of different varieties, but it's important that you're making sure that you're still rolling that into your plan. And hydration as well. When we exercise, we sweat, we lose fluid, pushing through and not remaining well hydrated can increase your risk of injuries, whether it's an actual muscle strain or an in-the-moment injury or chronic overuse injuries. Like diet, nutrition, and hydration are still part of the kind of package that should come with how you're trying to approach exercise and athletics.
Awesome. Gotcha. You're good. So, what do you think? Any last words for any weekend warriors or anyone thinking about becoming one? What's your words for them?
I would say be prepared, understand what you're getting into, to
so
borrow.
daunting.
Yeah, I know, right?
Be prepared.
Yeah, but to borrow from our one of our founding fathers, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? I like to go with the an ounce of preparation is worth a pound of performance, right? So the more time you spend preparing, there is a greater payoff over time, whether you're trying to get in better shape and be more fit, or whether you're trying to win and help your team win that league championship. That takes preparation, right? And that, I think, over time really does make a difference in reducing injury risk.
Awesome. Well, it's been a very informative Q&A. Do you feel like a little so are you
I'm never playing sports again.
No. So next year you feel like you've got some tools for next year, so we're ready.
1,000%,
and we're all coming.
Oh yeah, please bring the cameras by all means. Yeah, you
Yeah.
guys don't want to miss this stuff.
Yeah, because I want to see all right, this was me last year. This is the before. This is the after.
There's definitely having the hockey tournament again, and I will be participating. So I will be better prepared. That's for better prepared because I'll do the ounce of preparation thing for the pound of performance.
There you go. Awesome.
And I will go home and read about witch hazel.
All right. Well, Dr. Stache, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. It was a great experience. I was really glad to be here and help continue in other manners beyond what I do in the 4 walls of the office.
Well, it's always appreciate everything that you do for us here. So.
Thanks.
Great talking to you, Doctor.
My pleasure.
We'd like to thank Dr. Stache and, of course, Marc Farzetta for joining me today's episode. Where can people listen to your podcast?
All digital media. So you can watch the show on YouTube, you can watch the show on Twitter, you can watch the show on Instagram, all over the place, Facebook Live included as well.
Great. And same thing. So please make sure that you visit rothmanortho.com/podcast for all available episodes. Obviously, we're available the same Spotify, Apple, Google, various listening platforms. Again, make sure you enter our very special giveaway for the courtside tickets for the Clippers Sixers. And until next time, thanks for listening and take care and thanks again.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. Thank you.